So very often, when you come to camp, and looking at the different leaders, I know I used to wonder the same thing that other campers did. We wonder sometimes what makes a person tick, what makes him or her tick. I think all of us have our particular experiences, and all of our experiences would be different if we were to tell them. And sometimes I think that maybe it's a very good thing that you do ask questions and would want to know those things. I don't know. I think my greatest experience came after my visit to Coronas, the year 1945. I like to think of that because if one ever wanted to be baptized with love and with everything else that God has, why, it was in those days, that you really, if you didn't get baptized, it wasn't anybody's fault but your own. Because, let me remind you, I think the first year I went to camp, I'll tell you what kind of a leadership we had that year. I think that was the first year I met Roland and Marcia. And on top of that, there was Glenn Clark, there was Rufus Mosley, there was Starr Daily, there was Walter Fiskus, there was Verna Gale, there was Alice Kraft, and Verna Gale's husband, what's his name? All of those were there. Now just imagine a greenhorn like me being thrown off there on the campus among all of that power and whatnot, and I not knowing anything, just a plain old Baptist preacher. Well, you say, well, how come you're there? Well, I was there because my daughter had come in contact with the CFO group in Detroit, Michigan, where she was working at the Baptist Christian Center there. And some of the CFOs, as usual, got hold of her, and they used to have a 6 o'clock meeting every Sunday morning at a certain church in Detroit. And she wrote us and told us in such glowing terms what wonderful people these were, and how that she had been filled with the Spirit by being with them in that 6 o'clock prayer meeting every Sunday morning. And so finally she sent us one of these little folders of Coronas and said, by all means, you ought to go to Coronas. Well, we just believed everything she said. She has always led us in a way in these religious ventures. And so we, not knowing what it's all about, we put on a rally at our church. And nobody can do this but me, We put on a rally in our church to raise quite a bit of money to send a group of us up to Corona. So we raised about $400. Imagine a strict old, right down to earth Baptist church raising $400 to send a preacher off to a thing like a CFO, But they raised it, and we took our automobiles and we drove as far as Muskegon. We loaded automobiles on the Clipper, and it took us across to Milwaukee. We got in our cars again, and early that morning, we dumped about a dozen people off on the holy grounds of Coronas, and there we were. And to have all of those very high spiritual men around us and everything, it really was a treat. And yet, at that particular time, it wasn't a treat because I was curious. I saw Glenn Clark, and, I looked at him, and I said, well, he doesn't look like the real thing to me. And, of course, when I saw Rufus, he didn't look like it. And heard him. And I began to wonder. I said, maybe this $400 that we raised, maybe we just wasted. Maybe we'd better had kept it and, kept it at home there and did something else with it. But finally, as we began to float around through the crowd, I began to realize that there was something there. I said, well, I'll just tough it out the rest of the week. It's very disrespectful, to come to a place and just leave abruptly like that. And so we toughed it out that week, and finally on that Thursday, the following Thursday, remember Coronas had 2 weeks at that time. Imagine being there 2 weeks. What would a camp do at that time, though? We had to blow off steam. We quit it in recent years because the thing got so heavy. You remember we used to have a stunt night, you know. The thing would get so heavy you'd have to throw it off on some foolishness or other. But we went out on the island there, island experience, and that was kind of the thing that rather took hold. You remember that island had 3 levels to it. And also, you know, when we got off on the lower level, the physical level, why, we supplied the physical body. There is where we ate. We went up on the 2nd level, which was the mental level, and there's where we talk about the things of the world, the current events and whatnot. And just about the time that the sun was setting, why, we went up on the spiritual level, the high spiritual level up there. And there we would broadcast from up on top of that hill. And you know how we did that. And I never will forget what a beautiful sunset it was. While they had their arms up in the air and broadcasting to the 4 corners of the earth, how that the sun just shone a streak right across the lake there, right to this mountain upon which we were. And then I remember us coming down, a long line of us down this high hill with lights all the way down, singing, "Can others see Jesus in me?" And, you know, well, how can the world see Jesus if it does not see Jesus in me? And so coming on back home, why, as we were in our car coming back to Manitowoc, why, a great understanding flashed over me. And I told my wife, I said, "This is it." I suppose she thought I was crazy. But I told her, I said, "This is it." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I know now that people can live right here on earth together without going to heaven to live together." I said, "Because we have done it at this camp." And I said another thing. I said, "I'm going back home and I'm going to find out something real for myself." I heard Rufus tell about his experience, and I heard all in Starr, his beautiful experience, and all of them. And it seemed like they had gotten close to God so that it didn't make any difference what anybody else thought. Why, they knew. And so I went back home, and as some of you know, why, I sought God for myself, more real, because I said, if Glenn can do it, if the rest of them can do it, I said, "Lord, why not me?" As wonderful as their experience is, why, I want to experience the burning Warfield. And that's what I sought after, and I found it. I meditated for about 18 months, we might say consecutively, nearly every night that I could, that I was at home. I would get up and dress between the hours of 12 and 6 in the morning. At that time, I didn't know why I got up at between 12 and 6, but I think it was Marcia, I don't know whether she remembers that or not, that it was at the Texas camp. I think she asked me, said, "Do you know why you get up at that time?" I said, "No, I just got up. Just seemed like a hand touched me." And then she, being the professional woman, the expert that she is, she told me what it is in flowers, isn't it, that the cells are at their highest peak between the hours of 12 and 6, and so it is with the human body. And that man, between those hours, can be at his highest spiritual experience, development at that particular time. But I didn't know it, but I do know one thing, that I came very close to God in between those hours. And long before that experiment and meditation was over, Bernie Warfield knew God better than he'd ever known him before. And because of that experience, why, it changed my whole life. It changed my way of living. It changed my way of preaching. It just changed my whole attitude. And also it gave me a great love for people, more than I'd ever had before. And I know that, you know. I just love people, you know. Because people are made out of this stuff out of which I am made. And I'm made out of this stuff out of which God is made. I know that. I found that out. I wanted to know how much a part of God I was and how much a part of him was me. If there's any grammatical sequence in that. And then I began to meditate upon that, and I wanted to know for myself. And I know now that all of us are children of God. God is an ocean, and we are just drops out of that ocean. And yet in that drop, we have all of the ingredients and all of the elements that is in the whole ocean. We are not the whole ocean, but we are drops out of the ocean. Glenn always told me, he said, don't ever forget, Bernie, to drop that one about the biscuits. You that haven't heard it, why, we shall share it with you. You that have, why, go along with us, won't you? We like to liken God to as a batch of dough. Now, many of you younger people don't know much about how my mother used to make biscuits. She used to knead the dough, mix up the stuff with her hand and then knead it with her hands and then roll the biscuits out and then cut them out with a big tin cup, and put them in the pan. And of course, some of you don't know anything about that. There's Ballard's biscuits and puff biscuits and all those things. You can get them in a can, But my mother used to make a great big batch of dough and roll it out and put them in the pan. And if there were the old wood stove, if it was acting right, it was very temperamental. It was very temperamental about the kind of wood you used. If the wood was green or rather soggy, why, you just had one of those fires, that you put the biscuits in, why you had to wait a long time, and then the biscuits wouldn't get brown. They'd get just about half-baked. And then again, why, if we'd get some good dry wood, why, the old stove would just zoom, get real red hot. And Mom would put the biscuits in the stove, and she would wouldn't go across the street over the back fence, I would say. She'd get to talking with old Sister Hutchison and talk a little too long, and when she come back, the biscuits were about burnt, pretty dark on the, But, it brings a great lesson to us that all of us are biscuits off of the same batch of dough. You see, I got burnt a little bit too much, and you just about half-baked. And so we are both, so don't forget that. Whether you know it or not, I know it now. And that was a great revelation to me, And I'll tell you again about this, how necessary it is for us to seek after this for reality. Because after all, regardless of how many books you're going to read or how many of the leaders you talk to, you're going to have to find this what I'm talking about and make it real to yourself. You have to make it real to yourself. You've got to make God, you've got to have God, know that God is within you. Know that you are made in the image and likeness of God. Know that you're not just what you see on the outside. You're not the physical man. I'm just not this flesh and blood as you see, but I'm more than that. Because deep within inside of me, there is the image and likeness of God. And what is that image and likeness? It's the Spirit of God. Or if you want to call it, the Christ of God in you, in me. There is in all of us that light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world. The only thing is that we haven't found it. When we find it, people say, well, I've been born again. Another one will say, well, I've got the Holy Ghost. Another one said, I've got the second blessing. But it's all a discovery of what has been there all the time. And all each one of us has to do is to find it. It's within you. It always has been there. When God breathed into man's nostrils and man became a living soul, that was put into you and was put into me. And a story goes along with that. I think illustrates that. It is said at the time that God created man, why they sat around the council table and they began to discuss and to ask the question, well, we have made man in our own image. Where shall we hide it? Where shall we put it? And so they sat around the council table and they began to discuss as to where they will put this that they have made in the image and likeness of God. One said, well, I'll tell you what let's do. Let's put it up on the highest mountain. Said, man will never find it there. Well, they thought about it and scratched their heads, as it were. They said, no, said, man will scale the highest mountains and he'll find it. Well, another one said, well, let's go out and put it and hide it in the depths of the sea. Said, no, that won't do. Said, man will sail the seven seas until he finds it. So, well, I'll tell you, let's bury it deep, 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 deep down in the earth. Well, they began to shake their heads and said, no. So man will take a Geiger counter and he'll go over every inch of the earth until he finds it. And there's always a little insignificant one in the crowd, you know, one who's not supposed to know much. And so he held up his hand and said, gentlemen, said, I'll tell you what we'll do with it, and man will never find it. And they said, well, what do you know about it? He said, where will we put it then? You know so much. He said, let's hide it within man himself. And said, he'll never find it. And the story says they did. And even now we find people searching here and yon and going to Europe and to Asia and to the Holy Land and everything, hoping to find it. When they're in the final analysis, they'll find it right within themselves because it's always been there. Every man has that spark and has that drop of water of God deep down within him. Every man has it. It's always been there. And it is only when we discover that and begin to live that and begin to develop that we have put our foot on the path to become his sons and his daughters. In this particular thing, you will be quite disturbed sometime. I know people have come to me and said, Bernie, well, it seemed like on this thing, and I'm trying to do the best I can, and it seemed like things just begin to get a little topsy-turvy. And do they get that way? When you discover it, you say, well, I've got this thing now, and I'm doing the best I can. I think people ought to let me alone. Don't you? You know, you got that experience. Well, I'm living better than I've ever lived before, and yet, Bernie, I have problems. And that's good. That's good. Because without problems, we will find ourselves, we get into a nest of complacency, and we just don't want to move out. I like to think of that beautiful story in the Bible. Let's see. As an eagle stirreth up her nest, and flutteth over her young, and beareth them on her wings, so the Lord did lead them. Let's talk about that a few minutes. Because God has always, and He is always, given you and I lessons in nature. It is said that the eagle builds its nest some as wide, I would say, in circumference as 5 feet. Some of them lay 4 eggs and 5. And she builds it high, upon the highest crag, on the highest peak that she can build it. And they say she builds it with rocks and twigs and thorns, and then she lines it with soft down and fur from animals and birds. Then the little eaglets are hatched. And after so long, they are so comfortable in that little warm nest until the mother eagle thinks it's time that the young ones ought to begin to fly. And she begins to get in there and begin to flop her wings over them. And the little eagles, they just scream out, don't know what's coming off here. Here we've been comfortable all these years, and here my mother is flopping me. And she'll do that for quite a while. And if they don't move out and begin to kind of exercise their wings, the eagle each day begins to take a little of the down and a little of the fur from around the nest. And every time the little eagle backs up against the soft down where it used to be, they are pricked and makes them scream and makes them holler. And they don't know what is happening to them. And each day the old mother eagle just scrapes out a little more down until finally there's nothing but the thorns in there. And then she gets in there with her big claws and begins to stir up the young ones, and they scream and they fly. And they begin to jump out of the nest. Their mother eagle making her young ones get out of the comfortable nest and to learn to use their wings. And so they begin to get out. And it's the same thing, friends. You know, I found that I get a little uneasy when things are going too soft with me, you know. I know God has stirred my nest, but I thank Him for every stirring that He's ever given me. He's not mean, because you and I are destined to become His sons. And all sons of God have wings, their own wings. And when you try your wings, remember that God is always watching. He'll not let you fall. They say that the mother eagle takes the young ones out, 2 at a time. And she takes them out on her wings and just drops the wing down and to see if they can fly. And they begin to fly very awkwardly. And she watches them. And if it seems like they're going down too fast and going to disturb, the old mother eagle gets under and lifts them up on her wings again and then let this one down. Letting the young eagle learn how to fly. Oh, how many times has God taken you and I out on his wings, and we thought that when he let down that he wasn't watching us, and we began to plummet, and we began to scream just like the little eagles did, and we said, this is all, this is it, this is it. Just about that time, the wings of God comes up under us and lifts us up again, you know. It's God only trying to tell you and me that we've got to use our wings. And the thing about it is that we have wings. Don't let nobody tell you that you haven't. You've got wings. Whether you see them, you don't have to see them. You've got them. Deep down within you, keep on saying, I can fly. I can fly. You know, there's another particular insect. You know, I wish I could have been a botanist or something like that, or a biologist or something like that. These things intrigue me. You know, there's another insect. It's called the dragonfly. Now, of course, down in Kentucky where I was born, we call them snake doctors, you know. Well, the snake doctor, you know, he's got wonderful wings. He can just stand still and just flutter his wings, and you can't hardly see him move, and then he can shoot right off just like a jet. And a fellow was telling me the other day he was riding on the back of a train, and this train was going around 60 or 75 miles an hour, and said one of these dragonflies just ran into the back of the train, showing you what speed it had. But they say when this dragonfly incubates, say he flies over water, and he drops his egg down at a certain place in the water, and it stays down there. And it's what you call it, larva for a while, you know, just like a worm. And he said that this little dragonfly carries on a conversation with himself down there, you know, and with other things down there all the time, you know. While he's squirming around there on the bank, why, the different things are coming up to him and saying, well, fella, you'll never get out of here. You haven't got any wings. And said the little dragonfly, I can fly. Yes, I have. I can fly. Why, they're trying to convince him, say, why, you're nothing but a worm. There's not any place for any wings. But the little dragonfly keeps on saying, I can fly. I'm going to fly. And he keeps that in his mind. They say until finally the little dragonfly finds a weed sticking up, and he attaches himself to this weed after a set period of time, and he begins to ease up beside this weed and comes on out of the water. And as he comes up out of the water, these little sprouts of wings begin to stick out on him. And he kind of looks over himself for a few days, and pretty soon he takes off. You know what I'm trying to say? I don't care whether you see your wings or not, honey. I don't care whether you look like a son of God or not. I don't care whether you can walk like him or talk like him or live like a son of God. But keep on saying, I am a son of God. I can be, I will be a son of God. You know, when you think about that, why, it gives me something to go on. It gives me something to anticipate. Because when I think of this great wonder of God, how God can take somebody like me and can make me to become a son of God, I marvel at it. That he could take a little barefoot boy like me from the dusty roads of Kentucky and Tennessee. And one of these days I'm going to have everything that any son of God has. I know that. And what God will do for me, he'll do for you. because we are all one spirit. We are spirit of each other's spirit. We are mind of each other's mind. We are life of each other's life. For there is no life but God's life. Oh, wait a minute, I'm running ahead of time here. Let me say this. Sometimes we think we are very solid and that we are very separate one from another. But none of us are. None of us are. Nobody here. You can't take anything with you. Every one of us here will leave something of ourselves here. It's done. It's done every day. I'll tell you how it's done. And it was revealed to me this way. When I lived in Frankfort, Indiana, we had a little dog named Spot. And as we would come to town to shop on Saturday, I had a Model T Ford then. It had I think a 16 transmission and a 17 engine. And we would come up to town and shop. And we would leave Spot at home, and we would run off from him because it'd be crowded uptown, and he would just be a nuisance. And so we would drive that mile and a half uptown and park our car, the Model T. And 9 times out of 10, after we were through shopping, and when we would go out to the Model T car, who could we see laying under the car but Spot? How did Spot get there in all that crowd? How did he know us? How could he trail us from anybody else? Somewhere along the road, we had left some of ourselves along the road, and Spot found us. And all the tracks that were on the street, Spot smelled our tracks and could tell it because we had left some of ourselves in that street. And we do rub off on each other. And that's the reason CFO will do you so much good. You think it's the leaders. It's not the leaders. It's each one of us rubbing love and whatnot, off on each other. That's right. And the camp, the glory of the camp is this to me now, is that we begin to realize it so very much. That you don't worship anybody, but it's these, what I like to call angels in the outfield. They're the ones that does the job for you. These loving people that you talk with and so willing to help and they're so willing to love you and everything like that. These angels in the outfield, they're the ones that really bear you up and love you and cause you to become. Thank you for this time. Shall we bow our heads? O eternal Father, thank you for your love. Thank you for everything that you have given us. Thank you for everything that we've experienced. And, oh God, pour into our hearts your love. And for us, give us your highest this week. May we so empty ourselves that we can be filled with thy best and with thy highest. For we ask it your love. And for us, give us your highest this week. May we so empty ourselves that we can be filled with thy best and with thy highest. For we ask it in the name of Jesus, our Christ.